is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Hey AJ, thank you for your good evening in the chat. There might be something that I still have to get in order with my setup, but anyway, I'm not hearing myself. Now I'm here. Alright, welcome to this Sunday stream about the Bauer 101 locomotive, the expert locomotive, the only expert locomotive that we have in the game. JJ, good evening. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name properly, but I am very happy that you are appearing on the chat. Thank you for your follow and your support. Yeah, what are we going to do today? We are going to look into the Expert 101 locomotive, the only expert DLC that we have so far, at least on the Epic Game Store, because you might know that I am running my train symbol installation on the Epic Game Store, not on Steam, and therefore it hit me like a hammer that DTG decided 2 days before the release that the new gameplay pack for the Expert 101 would not be released on the Epic Game Store because they apparently ran into some issues with the Epic Game Store version, and they decided to release the DLC on Steam and on Gen 9 consoles, but not on the Epic Game Store, what is the first time that a piece of content for Train Sim World 5 is available on Steam, but not on the Epic Game Store. And as someone who has bought around 100 DLCs on the Epic Game Store, like 3 deluxe versions of the game over the years, and with the stuff that I got as an ambassador, have set up of about 135 DLCs on the Epic Game Store. It is really frustrating to see that there is now one piece of the puzzle that you cannot get on the Epic Game Store. Lofty, good evening to you as well. Nice to see you on the chat. So this is a thing where I had really to chew on during the last week, and it is still not clear whether they are releasing the gameplay pack for the Expert 101 that was released on Thursday last week on Steam and Gen 9 consoles on the Epic Game Store after all the hustle with Train Sim World 6 is over and they have some time to spend on things like this. I have a feeling that it is economically not interesting to invest the man hours to fix the Epic Game Store version of a 10-box DLC just to sell a couple of copies on the Epic Game Store, and this might result in the fact that the Epic Game Store version of the game cannot be completed to a full collection. I'm talking to them. I will try my very best to convince them that it is really a hard blow for everyone who is invested in the Epic Game Store, like I am, and especially was before I got to be an ambassador. If you can't complete your collection, and even if it is just one single piece, a 10-buck DLC, it contains some interesting new features, stuff that we haven't seen before, like written orders and documents on the table and stuff like this. We might look at this on this stream in my Steam installation then that I have with a couple of DLCs, probably the DLCs that I need for it, but still, you can see it. I do not really want to switch to Steam just because of an issue like this, lose my level 2410 player profile with thousands of hours of gameplay put into it, and rebuy all the missing 70 DLCs that are missing on the Steam account compared to the Epic Game Store. What is a 4-figure amount in retail price at any rate, and well, this is actually what I was really disappointed, angry, and whatever about. So I will try, and I tried so far, and still I will try to treat this as fairly as it gets. But you might hear my frustration still. The Expert 101 locomotive is a super great locomotive, and I'm so happy that it is in the game. It is really fun to play. It is interesting with the faults and all the trouble that you can run into it. The cruise control, the AFB is working really well. It does not overshoot. It does what it is supposed to do most of the times. So it is a brilliant piece of work, and not to get the second piece of this work on the Epic Game Store is super frustrating for me. And well, today we will look into the basic version of the Expert 101 locomotive, and in connection with a topic that we have to go through before you can properly play this locomotive in a timetable. There is a couple of routes that have an extra timetable for the 101. So for example, the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn, and this is where I chose to drive tonight. Again, a disclaimer, I got the route DLC and also the Expert 101 DLC for free, since I am an ambassador. This is what I got for free. I'm not getting paid for this, and well, you might imagine that what I told you so far, and with my disappointment at the moment, this is my unfiltered opinion, as you are used to get from me in my streams. And as always, this will not change. So, what did I want to do? There are a lot of scenarios where you can play the Expert 101 with scripted faults and stuff, what is quite nice. It is just not so fresh because it is scripted, and the really interesting thing is to get random faults in the timetable mode, and in the journeys, not the journeys, the scenarios, obviously you get led step by step through what you have to do. Not so in the timetable mode. If you run into a fault in the timetable mode, you have to figure it out yourself with the locomotive. So I consider this the really interesting part of all this. But still, I would like to have the gameplay pack with the new scenarios and at least one new timetable for Frankfurt-Fulda. What we are now missing on the Epic Games Store at the moment. So you got 4 different versions of the Expert 101 locomotive. The red one with the MFA, the IC livery one, the white one with the MFA, the red one with the MFD, what is the Multifunktionsdisplay as composed to this Anzeigegerät with all the indicator lamps, and then there is an NFA version in red with the Railbow Einzig Anders Pride livery that also comes with the original DLC, I think, or it was added later, actually, I don't really know. At any rate, the other 3 you get with the original DLC, so MFA, MFD versions, and also the IC version. And I will drive the white IC version, if the game lets me and does not kick me out again. Timetable, white ICE, and I wanted to do this one, IC 2057, from Saarbrücken to Frankfurt am Main. So at least the part from Mannheim to Kaiserslautern. I think this is the direction that we're going. So let me just quickly add this here. 2057 to Frankfurt. Main station, and it is the Expert timetable starting at 18:23. I picked this service because it stops at Ludwigshafen, which is quite nice. So I hope this was the proper thing to do. It is a long name. Nevertheless, Okay, now is it to go? Saarbrücken, Frankfurt am Main. Not clear, maybe let's have light clouds, otherwise we have always those weird shadow artifacts. And we will tackle this as we do this usually. We will just look around very carefully, and where we have to input our train data, then go through a little presentation about where the train data comes from, how to calculate it, how to input it, and then after that we restart the service and drive it for real then. So here we are. TGV parked next to us, also nice. First thing that we encounter is we are not force opening the doors on this train, but we are actually allowing the passengers to open the doors. We enable the Türfreigabe, and then it is up to the passengers actually if they want to unlock it. It does not work though if we don't insert our reverser handle and put it to neutral. Then it should actually start running here, or maybe we have to turn this thing again after we did that. Mr. Toby's dead. Good evening, looking forward to this lesson. So nice to have you in the chat. And see, now this thing is running and the passengers are opening the doors and closing them. Something that we have on SimRail from day one is now the much more realistic version of doing this, instead of force opening and force closing the doors at every stop. Yeah. We have this display here, what is very important, telling us here in the middle that we have not switched the reverser to one direction. That is true because we have it in neutral. We have our brakes still on, what is good, because the first thing that we will look at is the train data. This funny machine, it is an LZB80 ZDE2. ZDE means it is ein Zugdateneinsteller, what is German for a train data input device. And this is what it is for. It is for inputting the train data. And the train data have 4 items like BRA, BRA-H, ZL and VMZ. At the moment it is flashing. It shows us the so-called basic data that allows the operation of the train, but only very slowly, and we don't want this. We want to run it with intercity speed, and for that we have to insert better train data that allows the train to perform higher. And why do we actually need those train data? Well, if you're looking for your PZB switch, the switch where you turn on the PZB and select OMU, then you will look very long, because it is not on this train and it is not there in reality, because this is one thing that this device here does. It calculates the proper PZB mode based on the train data that you input, and if you happen to run on LZB, not on this route here, then it also uses the train length data here for ZL Zuglänge, train length, and the maximum speed and the brake capability of the train to calculate brake curves, to calculate at what spot you can accelerate, and all the stuff. It is handling the safety systems. Maybe nowadays we are all used that the train has sensors and gets the input from whatever devices and units on the train automatically. Not so in former times. The further back we go in history, and this thing here came into existence in the 1980s for the first time. Microprocessors, but not everything was interconnected, and there was some sort of a gap that had to be breached by the human factor, so that we had to calculate those data and input it with these devices here. And here on the bottom we have the so-called Daumenrad schalter. That means a thumb wheel switch, where we can use our thumbs to cycle through those numbers to put them here together in a way that we are happy with them, and then push the send train data button and punch them into the train computer in that way. So how do we know what numbers we have to set and punch into our train data? For that, especially on trains that can do PZB and LZB together, our train operating company provides us with the information necessary, and this looks a bit confusing, at least from the onset, because well, without a little more insight and explanation, at least I would not be able to glean the numbers that we have to punch in with our thumbs into this device from this table here alone. This is probably a good point to switch in the presentation already. So today, not much driving before we get to the presentation, but anyways, where did I put it? Here. And now let's run it. And can I put it on the stream? Yes, here we are. So train data, and you can see it on the right side, PZB LZB unit. So on trains that only run PZB, it is significantly simpler to put in the train data, because we only need two items of train data to put into the train, so that the train can calculate the proper PZB mode. With LZB trains, or trains that can run LZB, it is significantly more difficult, and they need more train data and do a lot of more calculation and performance. If you want to read it up, you can read the new Richtlinien that come into existence in December 2025 this year. I've numbered, or I've given you the numbers and the parts in the directives where you can find information about train data, especially on PZB LZB devices, or particularly the LZB80. There are also the current regulations for it. There is not really a big difference, but there is a new system in publishing those directives, as we have discussed in the video that we did 2 weeks ago. So this is our device that we just had a look at, the Zugdateneinsteller, the ZDE, for our LZB80 PZB LZB device. And interesting for us is especially the part at the bottom. The part on the top left is not a Zugdateneinsteller, but a Dateneinsteller, where you can punch in more data for the train, actually, like the number of the train, the number for the driver, and stuff like this. It is not functional in the game. Then it has like an interface where you can connect it with a different computer, and it has like a cartridge where the event recording happens. This is this DSK Datenspeicherkassette, for example, and then it has a lot of lights that can light up and can tell you that something is wrong, but I don't think that here anything can go wrong on the locomotive. At least I have never seen it yet. So what are those 4 items of train data that we have to give the train? We will start with the first one, BRA. That is, here obviously we are in the MFA-version, that is the Anzeigegerät, Modulares Führerraumanzeigegerät. That is the thing with the dials and lamps and indicators, as opposed to only a display that we have for getting our information from the train. The older version, the one that we already had in the 1980s. And the first item that we have to set is the BRA, and this is Some directives call it for the Bremsstellung, some call it is for the Bremsart. There is a difference between Bremsart and Bremsstellung, but the directives in this context don't really distinguish this properly from each other. It is about how you set your brakes to G for slow timing, or to P for faster timing, or even to R for more pressure on the rapid passenger trains. So especially for freight trains, you remember all this discussion, how many vehicles and locos do you have to set to P or to G. And on passenger trains, typically you have the highest available thing, what is normally R or R plus mg if you have a magnetic track brake, or R plus WB if you are on an intercity 3, an ICE 3 with the eddy current brake. So you have to tell the train what your brakes are set to. Setting the brakes is a pneumatic thing, more or less. So at this time, at any rate, there was no way that the train could tell its own computer what the brake system was set to. So the most efficient GP or R setting that is used on the train determines what number we have to punch in. And for that we have this little table here on the right, where you can see if you are a freight train, a Güterzug, or a passenger train, a Reisezug, and what brake setting you are actually using. If you are a passenger train, that is quite easy. You're typically running either in P, in R, or what is more interesting for us on the IC, R plus a magnetic track brake. Then we have to punch in the 9. If you are a freight train, then you have to see if you are running your train all in G, then you have to punch in 2. If you are running it in P, you have to punch in 4. If you're on a train that has only PZB, it is even easier. Then you have to punch in a 1 for the G setting and an 8 for everything else. On the LZB PZB combined unit, you have the 2, the 4, or the 9 for whatever brake setting you are running. And this goes here, and we use this thingy here with our thumb to set it to the correct number. That is already all. So when we are running our Expert 101, typically we are running passenger trains, not freight trains, so we punch in a 9 at this point. Don't really need to change it a lot because the 9 is typically already preset, and we can leave it. This next one, BRH, is for Bremshundertstel. This arcane figure in the German operating rules that typically translates to brake percentage, what gives you an indication of the braking capability of your train. Yeah, how good the brakes are, how fast they act, how efficiently the train can burn its own velocity and come to a stop. The higher the number, the better the braking capability of the train. The lower the number, the more problematic it is to get the train to a stop, especially within the 1,000 meters of a regular braking distance between the distance signal and the main signal. So we have 2 videos at least about how to calculate Bremshundertstel and what to do with it, so I won't go into the details too much. The basic thing is you have to get the brake weight for your whole train, that is the locomotive and all the cars. Typically it is written on the vehicles. Sometimes it is difficult to find out what number is the relevant number for you, because it is given sometimes for G, P, R, R plus mg, R plus E, R plus whatever. Sometimes R plus E160 on locomotives, some locomotives even P2. For freight trains it can even be more complicated with the load change capabilities of these cars. I will refer you to those 2 videos on my channel, Bremshundertstel 1, Bremshundertstel 2, for the details. The basic thing obviously is brake weight divided by the train mass. Historically, they did not really distinguish between weight, Gewicht, and mass, Masse. Actually, it is the Masse that we are calculating here, but it is traditionally called Gewicht. So we call it Gewicht, even if we are talking about mass, and that it is a mass, it shows that we are calculating it in tons. Dividing tons by tons ends up in a number without any unit. We multiply it by 100 and round it down, and this is our figure that we get for the Bremshundertstel. And then, not good enough, we have to translate the Bremshundertstel that we get to our BRH input value. It would be so easy to just punch in the first two digits of our brake percentage here, but no. To fine-tune actually all the behavior of those trains according to tests and stuff, for trains that run PCB and LZB, the train operating company typically issued a table that tells you what values to actually put into this BRH input slot if you are coming from a certain number of brake percentage points. So if you, for example, calculate something like 202, then you look into this column here with 202, you end up here 184 to 205, then you would punch in 180. The last figure is already set fixed, so you put only in the 18. This is why we already have the 18 here, and this is the range. It depends a bit on what cars and how many cars we have in our train in our intercities, because the formations they differ a bit. Depends on whether we have a cab car at the end or no cab car at the end. So we end up somewhere in this corridor here between the 180 and the 210, and so we have sometimes to punch in 18 or sometimes to punch in 20. If you don't want to do the calculation all the time, then you can punch in 18 and you are typically fit to go with your expert locomotive. So this goes into this input slot, and we use our thumb to set the figure here. How does it work actually in real life? In real life, you would still have to have a so-called Bremszettel, what is like the brake sheet for your car. And according to my knowledge, at any rate, it is the Zugführer who is responsible for generating this brake sheet before the train can run. Zugführer is not necessarily the same person who is driving the train, but more often than not, especially if there's only one person on the train crew, then the Zugführer is the head of train or person in charge of the train. It is the same person as the driver that is driving the train, but sometimes it's not so unlike on intercity trains. Especially in the past, you had someone who was the head of the train, the head conductor, the Hoofdconducteur in Dutch, for example, and he will be the train chief. So he will be the Zugführer, and he will be in charge of getting this brake sheet done. Not the driver necessarily. And here you can find that you have to put into this sheet those two figures that we have used to calculate our brake percentage, the brake weight and the train mass for the whole train. Wagenzug, that is the consist of the cars, plus the working locomotives added together. Here is the here are the totals for both, and then you calculate the brake percentage by dividing one by the other. Here in this example you would end up with 162. We typically end up with a higher value. Before we get to the train length, how would we actually get to this number if we have to figure it from scratch? Let's do a little experiment how we get to this, and for that I built a very rudimentary calculator in Excel, where you can see I can punch in numbers for maybe I'll move it a bit. Oh, it's actually in a good position, is it not? Where we can put in numbers for the brake weight, Bremsgewicht, the mass Gewicht, and the maximum authorized speed. That is for the next item already, or the one at the end. But here we can sum it up more or less. Here is a number field. We can see how many locos we have. Already can punch in that we have only one loco. And then we can see 3 different cars it provides, and then it calculates the Bremshundertstel. It is at the moment it is a division by 0 mistake that it shows, because we did not have any numbers that we punched in so far. So let's get the presentation out of the way, and let's see where on the vehicles those numbers are actually given. And for that, maybe we sit in our driver's seat and use the external camera. So let's start with the locomotive. Where does it say how heavy our locomotive is? What is the mass? We are looking for a thing like this. The number that has typically nothing else around it, not any combination of letters that represent a certain brake setting, would be the mass of the vehicle. So here those 84 tons would be the mass of our locomotive. So we can already punch in the mass of our locomotive is 48. Now we have a lot of different brake weights given here on our locomotive, not only G, P, R, but only P plus E, what would be the dynamic brake. R plus E would be R plus dynamic brake, and then this arcane setting of R plus E 160. It is slightly higher, and the spoiler, the outcome of everything, the R plus E 160 setting is typically the one that we would use for our intercity services. So I punch in the 168. We have explained it in one of the Bremshundertstel streams. I will get to it in the end when we're done with our calculation. What is the difference between R plus E 160? R is clear because we are setting our brakes here to R, to the most effective that we can have on a passenger train. E we can use because we are using our dynamic brakes. The dynamic brakes are working, they are not broken, they are all operational, and we have at least 3 cars in the train that allows us to use the brake weight including the E rating for the dynamic brake. And why we use the one with the 160 I will come back in the end. Let's find out what cars we have and how heavy they are and what brake weight we would have to put into our equation for the cars. First thing that we notice is that we have a car here just behind the locomotive that is an AVMMZ car. The A in the beginning of a passenger coach always tells you that this is a car that has a first class compartment, as opposed to a B in the beginning that tells you that it has a second class compartment only. And what we can glean from all the stuff that is written on this car, let's see where the brake markings are. One thing that we can already see is the mass here. This thing tells us on passenger coaches the mass, and what would we take from this? There is a 47, there is a 51. Which one do we take? The 47 would tell us this is the mass of the train if there is no passenger in it, or the mass of the car with no passenger in it, and 51 would be the weight that it is rated if it is actually full. 54 seats does the car have, and 51 is the highest mass that it can have with all the people inside. So there is one car at any rate behind the locomotive that has a mass of 51. Now we still don't know what brake weight we can add. Let's look on the other side for this car. We have already made clear that we're switching it to the most potent brake here. Here is the brake selector for the car. Every car has one. And here you can already see in G it would have a brake weight of 43. In P it has a brake weight of 64. In R, what is here distinguished between two figures without a device that is called the Schnellbremsbeschleuniger, the fast brake accelerator, it would have only 70 with this fast brake accelerator working at a 75. And here it is hidden a bit. R plus MG plus the magnetic drag brake we can set in 107. We should have actually a writing or a marking on the car that tells us the same, yeah, like here. R plus MG 107 tons, and this is what we punch since it is operational in for this car 107 tons. Braked weight. Now let's see how many of those first class compartments we have and if the second class compartments are different ones. So the next car is already one that starts with a B, so it does not have a first class, it's a different car. Let's see if it has a different rating. And yes, we can see it is actually a bit more efficient in braking. It has a 108 brake weight for our setting that we have. Let's see if we can find out how heavy it is. Here is the marker. It is 51 tons with 80 seats. Empty, it is a bit lighter than the other one, but for the other car that we have at this point, we punch in 108 for the braked weight and 51 for the mass of the train. And then let's see how many cars we have of each sort. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No driving trailer at the end, no cab car at the end. So we have 5 cars of that capacity, and that ends up, and if you add up all the brake weight and the mass, you end up with 208 Bremshundertstel brake percentage. This confirms us, without getting too much into detail, that it was okay to take the R plus E of 160 rating on our locomotive. If we ended up with less than 170 brake percentage here, with 170 or less even, then we would have been obliged to take one step back, put in a lower weight here for the locomotive and subtract 8 tons from each car's braked weight to calculate the final brake percentage. But we don't need to do that. We are actually far beyond the 170. This is a bit an arcane thing, whether we have to look at this 170 margin before we calculate everything, or if it is first calculated without the 160 rating. I think the correct way is to do it like this, to calculate it with the R plus E rating first, and if you end up above the 170 you can leave it, and only if you end up with less than 170 then you have to reduce your figures accordingly. But if anyone knows that this is the wrong way to do it and you have to calculate it in a different way, just let me know. It would be really interesting. The part in the 915 brake directive is a bit ambivalent, so it is not really clear how to calculate it properly. So with the 208 we can go back, and now we need the presentation again. We can go back to our Einstelltabelle, and we see with 208 we are here, and we can actually punch in a 20 at this setup here with our train. So quite difficult and complicated to do especially if you have to figure in all those specifics and details for calculating the brake weight of your vehicles. But the principle is convincing. The train needs to know how efficient the brakes are that are running on the train to perform properly as a safety system, and this is what you do here. And then typically the train calculates based on the brake percentage and the brake setting in what PZB mode you will be put. Here obviously O, PZB O and 85. Yeah, this is what the PZB part need. The LZB parts does need two more items for your train data. There is the train length. The train length, if you want to calculate it yourself, you can get it from the brake sheet. You would have to look into the Wagenliste. In the game, it is obviously easy because you just look onto your pause screen and then into overview, and then the game tells you how long your train is, and then you round it up to the next full 10 meters, end up with 180, and then you punch in the 18 and you're good. If you'd have to actually figure it out yourself, you would have to look for these markings here on your vehicles. They tell you how long the vehicle is. The one with the arrows is the distance between the pivoting pistons in the bogies or trucks. So the distance from here to here will be 19 meters, and the longer value is Länge über Puffer. That is from one puffer plate to the other. If you actually add up all those numbers for a given train in the game, you will see that you will end up with a higher number than the number that is given on the pause screen. What is due to the fact that the buffers get compressed when the cars are coupled. So you lose a bit of the length of each vehicle because the buffers are compressed, and this is why you typically end up with a lower number on the pause screen than the one that you end up by adding up all these numbers that you can find on the train models. Sometimes the numbers might not be correct either, so this is a different thing, but typically they work and end up with a slightly higher number, and they subtract like a couple of centimeters for each coupling in the train. But I think it is safe enough to use the number in the pause screen, even if you can actually get some slack into the train when you're actually running it. But still, if in doubt, you can always add another 10 meters and you're on the safe side. Yeah, this is a thing that tells you this thing underneath this Einstelltabelle. Einstellwert ZL, input value ZL for train length. You always have to punch in the length of the whole train rounded up to the next 10 meters. In meters divided by 10 rounded up, because you only punch in the first two digits. So this ends up here. Last one that the train wants to know is the VMZ, the maximale zulässige Geschwindigkeit des Zuges, the maximum authorized speed for the train. And this one is determined by three limiting factors for the train. One is the maximum authorized speed for the locomotive. And for the locomotive, it is also not so super simple to calculate, because you have to refer back to this table, and those three columns here are actually for calculating the Vmax for the locomotive. You would have to start again from what brake setting you're coming, because 2, 4 or 9 determines different values. If we are coming from the 9, we are in this column here, and then you have to compare it again with your brake percentage. Sorry. I forgot to turn on the presentation again. Yeah. Let me go back. a second because the train length was not when I started talking about the train length. Here you have this bit underneath the Einstelltabelle that tells you that you have to round up your train length to 10 to the next 10 meters, full 10 meters, and here it goes in the ZL Wert. And then the last item, maximale zulässige Geschwindigkeit des Zuges, maximum authorized speed for the train. And as I said, for the locomotive, the Vmax, you start again with what you put in for the BRA value, and then you have these 3 columns in the input table that tell you if you are running in 2, then those values are relevant, and so on. And typically we are running with the 9 value, so the rightmost column is relevant for us. And then we go down and see where it meets with our brake percentage, and this ends up with a maximum velocity for the locomotive of 220. So we can put in our fast calculator here the 220 for the locomotive. And yeah, but this is obviously not the end yet. We have cars in our train, and the train cannot be faster than the slowest maximum authorized speed for any car. So how do we get the speed that a car is authorized to run? Let's just quickly jump back into the train and into the game, and we've seen this here already. It is this marking here. In this part of the marking at the side of the cars is giving you the maximum authorized speed for this car. 200. This car can run 200. So let's turn on the presentation again and put it in our calculator, and this you will also find on the first class compartment coach. So the limiting factor that we get here is the car, and it reduces our maximum authorized speed to 200 for the train. Now let's find my presentation again, but this is not necessarily the last word. First I will show you that we have the 200 here from the car. Also in your brake sheet you have a line where you can notify that some vehicles in your car, in your train, have a slower maximum speed than the train. Maybe this is something that gives you the idea that you cannot just look at the sticker in your locomotive and see this is the highest speed that I can go, because you have limiting cars in your train. And the third item that can limit your velocity according to this is the time, or the maximum speed given in the timetable that you are running on. In the game obviously we don't have a timetable, and we are running a service that is going from Saarbrücken to Frankfurt, most probably with parts where we go faster than 160. So this timetable probably has parts with a highest maximum allowed speed of 200. So we typically in the game, for game purposes, just disregard the timetable limitation. On the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn we can't go faster than 160, so maybe we have a timetable that has a maximum authorized speed of 160, so we could put in 16 instead of the 20 here for the VMZ. It does not really matter, since we are not going under LZB anyway, and I would just suggest to put in the 20 in case that this train goes into an LZB zone where we can go faster than the 160, and then the timetable would allow for that, I'm sure. But until we get timetables in the game, we must more or less ignore any limitation that comes from the timetable at this point. And then, yeah, the lowest of the 3 divided by 10 is our input value here. So if we end up with the 200 from the cars, then this is what we have to thump in here. So our little Bremsgewicht quick and dirty calculator calculates the brake weight, sums it up for all the vehicles in the train, Same with the mass, divides it, throws out our brake percentage, and at the same time it determines the lowest maximum authorized speed. So we know what we have to put in now. 9 for the R plus mg brake setting. We have to put in, according to that, a 20 for the brake percentage. We have to put in the 180 for our train length. We've seen this in the pause screen. And we can put in a 20 for the 200 maximum authorized speed of our train. Let's do that before we go to the rest of the presentation. Let's get it out of the way. The Excel thingy is out of the way as well. And I am back in my game. So if we punch in the data, 9 for the brake setting, 20 for the brake percentage, 18 for 180 meters of length, and 20 for the 200 maximum authorized speed. CD radar, hey, nice to see you. And then we press this ZD for Zugdaten, send train data, and then this device actually recognizes the data, and now we are running on those data. And one thing before we do anything else, I wanted to show you what is really cute that they built into this locomotive. There is a way to have the train show you the train data that you put in on the device that typically shows you all the relevant information about running under LZB. You know, like the distance counter here and the target speed, and this marker here for the speed that you should be on. And you can have the train show you the values that you punched in the train data thingy by holding down the PZB keys, the Freitaste and the Wachsamkeitstaste at the same time for 1 second. I will just do this with my keyboard shorts. And then you can see the train is showing you on the distance marker the 9 for the brake setting, on the target speed the 200 for, I think it's the train length, no, not the train length, for the brake percentage, and on the marker that typically gives you the V sol, it went to 200 for the VMZ marker here. And this shows you that the train actually got the data properly. So really kudos to TSG. That is really sweet and brilliant. Same thing is that the train can actually do a PZB LZB self-test. Yep. More to the self-test in a different video maybe. Going back to my presentation one more time. As I said in the beginning, we have two different versions, at least, of the locomotive in the game. The first one is the older one, the MFA version, where we have this data input device and the thumb wheels to punch it in. The other version is a more modern one, and yeah, this is the button that you have to press to get the data in. and the more modern version, the MFD version with the display instead of the Anzeigegerät, you have the same thingy not on the back wall but on your left screen. You go into this thing for putting in, and then you can punch in the data here in the same way, but on your MFD screen. And then you have to punch this key for getting the data actually valid. And after that, this is new, you have to push one time the PCB acknowledge key so that everything is actually up and running. Maybe we go through this in the game. For that, we have to leave our service again. And see, the Ray says, oh, I'm super interested in PCB LZB self-test actually. Well, then you have to contain yourself until we get there, because this is something that I have to look into myself before I can give you some solid information about this. So, same service again. With the 101 expert here with the MFD version. And the best thing about the MFD version is that they have a sticker in the place where the LZB80 ZDE device will be telling you that you have to punch in the data on the display. So, here we are. And you can see, whoops, there is no device of that kind. Also, they did not put the table here for what we have to put in. And here this sticker tells us Zugdateneinstellung im Display. Here you can just hang your code if you want. And then you have to go here. You get to the whole thing by Zugdateneingabe. Then you can see it is running on basic data at the moment. And with ZDE, that was the same thing that this device was called, Zugdateneinsteller. You can get here to punch in data. And then by punching in, you don't need your thumbs now, or you can use your thumbs, but you can use anything to press the soft keys next to it. And if you try to do this, you will see, it does not accept any data input. You need to know you only can do this if you put in your reverser handle and set it at least to one direction. Not even in neutral it works. You have to set it to one direction, and then it should be able, I hope it works now, yes. So punching in the same data that we determined before, I think it was 180 meters. Here it actually shows you the 0 that you did not punch in. And then this thing gets yellow, and you push the E. Data gets transferred. You have to push it a second time. Then it is in, and then it tells you you have to push your PCB acknowledge key to actually make it work. You can still see 55 flashing and the malfunction indicator flashing that is always telling you we don't have proper train data yet. So you find your PCB acknowledge key, press it, and now system is happy. Valid train data, it says gültige Zugdaten, and it shows you the 85 and no flashing indicators anymore. So this is how it works on the MFD version. But I wanted to run the other version for whatever reason, so I go out again. I somehow like this Dateneinsteller for the LZB thingy. And in the meantime, while the game is going back to the main menu, we have a third slide in our presentation. And this is, and Lofty says, what would invalid train data be? Well, invalid train data is probably not what is opposed to the valid train data. If the train does not have valid train data, then it drops back to the basic data. This leads us to what I wanted to talk on this slide here. If you just turn on your train from cold, or if you switch cabs actually, then you end up in a setting that is called the basic data. This is the second half of this table that is on the back of your MFA version of the Baureihe 101, and it gives you this table here for some special data and some special situations and a lot of explanations. Don't worry, I won't go through all this German text. I will give you the gist of it in English next to it. It's three special things. The one thing is what I just was talking about to Lofty, is that if you turn on the train from cold and turn on the system, and the system, you did not punch in any valid train data yet, then the system starts by using basic data. Basic data has the value of 6, of 40 brake percentage, of a length of 400 meters, or is the longest length that a train can typically have, a VM a maximum authorized speed of 100, and puts you by force into PZB-U, the lowest one. So it does safety first here, arrow on the side of caution. It lets you operate the train, but only with very, very limited values. So those are the basic data. And it tells you that those data are used and are valid for the system if there is no other input, if there is no valid train data put into the system. You can't use LZB. LZB-Betrieb ist nicht möglich with basic data only, and it is used if the brake percentage is lower than 66, or you are running your train in brake setting G and the train data input device is either switched off or not working properly. This is what it says here. In this case, you have to actually run your train with the basic data. In all other situations where you cannot punch in proper train data, but want to run your train anyway, now I have to turn off the music, otherwise I will be driven crazy. You can use the so-called surrogate train data, Ersatzzugdaten. And those are in the middle of this table here. They are significantly higher. You can use a 9, you can use 140 brake percentage, and a length of 400 again. 200 you can run, and you will be in PZB mode O. So if for whatever reason your input device does not work properly and you can't get in the proper train data, then you have a fallback layer for the surrogate train data that allows you to run your passenger train in PZB mode O and not being limited to very, very slow speeds and everything. It has a requirement of certain actual brake percentages that you still have to calculate, and you need to have at least 111 brake percentage if you want to run PZB, and at least 145 if you want to run in LZB. So it has a lot of text that is telling you what you need to do if you want to use the surrogate train data, and if you and what you have to do when running under it. It is used if input or regular train data is not possible for whatever reason. It is activated, and this is quite interesting because I think it is not implemented in the train. At any rate, I did not manage to get my train into surrogate train data in the game. You have to set your reverser to R backwards for 12 to 18 seconds and then move it back to forwards, and then you should activate the surrogate train data by doing this. So something between 13 and 17 seconds, and yeah, then the train should end up there. Well, I don't know if it is actually implemented. So far, I have never encountered any fault in the input device, so it always let me input the train data properly, so there was actually no real use in the game for using the surrogate train data. But anyway, the point is interesting if that works. Spectre, hey, long time no see, nice to have you back on the chat, and you are back in a great discussion about surrogate train data and whether it is actually implemented properly in the 101. Well, this is what it should do, and then it should punch these data into the computer, and you could run on those. And there are special requirements regarding brake percentages for PZB and LZB, and it tells you if you do not meet those requirements, then you have to put your PZB into Störschalter. You cannot run LZB, but you have to run PZB and consider it as malfunctioning. But those are things I don't think that we have encountered that in the game yet, because I don't think that we can run on surrogate train data. But it is definitely a thing that might be interesting to use in further DLCs. Those that will be hopefully released on the Epic Game Store and not only on Steam and Gen 9 consoles. So, Triebfahrzeugfahrt, that is the last one that is given here, and this is interesting. Light engine runs, and light engine runs meaning the locomotive alone or only locomotives. So, ein Lokzug. For that, you can use these data given here. So, you can use 130 Bremszettel, a length of 20 for your locomotive, and a VMZ of 200 PZBO. And here is some instructions for doing this. You can only use those numbers if your dynamic brakes are fully operational. If you are more than one locomotive, you have to punch in the actual train length, and obviously your your maximum authorized speed cannot be higher than the maximum authorized speed that is given by the timetable. Timetable is obviously always the limiting factor, no matter how safe your locomotive is running faster. If the track does not allow running faster, then your locomotive can be as fast as it might be. It is not safe to run it faster than the track allows. So that is what actually is the special situations basic data. If you can't get any data in, or if you are really slow freight trains with low brake percentages. In all other situations, when you cannot punch in proper valid train data, you can fall back to surrogate train data, and if you're running your locomotive alone, then you can use the data for the light engine runs. So I think this is what I wanted to tell you today. Yes, exactly. That was the presentation for today, and we can actually go back to running this train. And I enjoy it a lot, to be honest, to run the expert loco. And this is why I hate it so much that DTG decided to not release the gameplay pack for the 101 expert on the Epic Games Store. I might have repeated myself in this aspect a bit. But still, you have to understand me here. You're buying more than 100 DLCs, and all of a sudden the game developer tells you that you cannot complete your collection on the platform that you chose, and not for technical reasons like with the consoles, but obviously for economic reasons, that it is too much effort to fix it for the platform on Epic. Well, we will see. Maybe they will come to reason and will publish it later, at a later point after Train Sim World 6 has been out. Otherwise, yup, I forgot to turn on the sound again, but this can be fixed, I think. Juniper, nice to see you on the chat. He says, nice even if this is way over my head. Well, we will see. So, reverser in, neutral, open the doors. Contrast. This is our Zugfunk. We have to punch in the train number here as well. We will talk about Zugfunk a different time. Anmelden. Register into the net. AFB. Then the train data. 18 for the length. 200 for the maximum authorized speed. Yes. Signalleuchten. Contrast. Now I went through everything. Then we have to start our train line. Indicator went off. We have to unlock the brakes. Let's see if the passengers making it safely in and out of the train. ...30 seconds to go. Türfreigabe zurücknehmen. Can release the brakes because the AFB holding brake. Whoa! What is the AFB holding brake? Only if we put the reverser to forward. Now the AFB holding brake is holding us. Lights are on. Now we can start. And now important. If we're driving with AFB, we cannot start our train unless we put the throttle to max. Yes, Tea and Biscuits with her manager. I wanted to show you how this works. So, before releasing your brakes and relying on the AFB holding brake, always put the reverser to forwards. But this is important. If you don't put the throttle to maximum, the train will not start properly. It will always try to start, apply some power, release the brakes, and it will apply the brakes again. So it needs to go into max. If you're running a bit, then you can take back your throttle. Actually, it's like 5 kilometers or something, then you can take it back. Inspector says, sometimes I find it challenging to get the Expert 101 going. Well, with the AFB, it actually works like a charm. But we are in the wrong services, guys. What happened now? I wanted to go from Mannheim to Kaiserslautern, not the other way around. Applying just enough power in AFB without re-engaging the brakes, yeah. Well, just put it into max. That should do the trick. Yes. So again, the whole thing. This time, let's try to do it without fail. Kaiserslautern. Oh. Then I have to actually change my service indicator because I wanted to do this one. Because I wanted to go the other way around. So it is Frankfurt to Saarbrücken. It is actually the other way around. It is Frankfurt am Main. Oops. That happens. if you have the CIFA on caps lock, and it is 1664. No, 1646. Actually. All right. One thing I did not say during the presentation about the brake sheet. Obviously with setups like EMUs, ICE trains that do not change their formation, you typically have permanent sheet, a Dauerbremszettel, that is somewhere in the cab, so you don't have to do this all the time. But our IC formations, they can actually change. So, what did I say? Neutral, Türfreigabe, contrast, Zugdaten, train number is a different one, register, IFB. Now I stick with the 180. Length is, what is the length of our train? It's actually longer, 210. And the max is the same. Input, lights, contrast, train line, brakes unlock as long as the doors are open. We don't release the brakes and we don't touch the reverser. Everyone is in and out of the train who wants to go. That means we can take back the Türfreigabe. Doors are closed. Actually, I think this T indicator should light up if the doors are closed, right? But tell me if I'm wrong there. And then RFB to 40 because we're starting with a HP2. And then throttle to max. And this thing should run. You can see it is applying power, the brakes are releasing, and then it starts rolling. Distance signal actually switched from VR0 to VR1. Limited to 40 until we're out of the Weichenbereich. Any case we can release. So we don't forget if we get to out of the Weichenbereich. Don't actually know exactly whether we are ever getting out of the Weichenbereich before we get to the next signal, or whether we are just staying within station limits. The rails, so yeah, with the 103. This is another reason why I picked this service. And one reason is because we are stopping at Ludwigshafen. First we are crossing this nice bridge. After having left crossing the Rhine once more. Not to forget The signaling here at Ludwigshafen when you're running in this direction is a bit weird in my opinion. Either they are missing some LF7 signs, or the maximum authorized speed that is shown on the pause screen doesn't work properly. So you are safe to run with 60 even under the 1000 Hertz until we get to the 500 Hertz magnet. Inspector says, I said it before and I say it again, a modern day left Rhine would be really cool. 101s, ICEs, lots of freight and stuff. True enough. True enough. And I said it before and I say it again. Please release all the Expert 101 stuff also on the Epic Game Store so that I do not have to rebuy all my stuff on Steam just to have a full collection. Well, Türfreigabe. Also, this train tells you when it is okay to open the doors. The passengers sometimes are a bit reluctant to open their doors. Sometimes you can see that there is no door open, nobody is getting out, and if you open the doors by hand, people are pouring out. Thinking like, well, I actually did not want to leave the train, but now that somebody opened the door, well, just take this opportunity and stay here at Ludwigshafen. It's actually really a nice station here at Ludwigshafen. Introvert special train, yeah, because nobody gets out of the train until you open the doors. By the way, this thingy here provides you with a thing where you can calculate your brake weight. It actually does this division. Don't know if we really need this, because this is what every calculator can do. So, soon as I'm out of this Weichenbereich, limit increases to 80. That makes sense. Line speed was 80 all the time, but we were limited to 60 because of the signal. But this increase to 130 here, I can never find in any signal. Sometimes they give you a ZS3 on the signal for the 130. But there is no LF7 sign. And here we just get a high green. And still the limit starts at this signal here. Here it increases to 130. I did not check out... See, here it increases to 130. I did not check out any cap view videos. So how do we get out of this thing here again? And then it increases to 160 only by virtue of this ZS3 sign again. Without an LF6 sign. So I'm not sure whether this is correct on this route here. There are some signaling peculiarities. We will get to this later. Not only the turn on your main circuit breaker signals, for example. And the AFB on this locomotive is so great, it does not overshoot, typically not. So you can look at the landscape. And let's see if we get any malfunction. If you want, you can increase the risk of malfunctions by increasing the chaos factor here. But for the time being, I just want to leave it as it is. I think we will be routed on the opposite track, Gegengleis, on this service as well. What does not happen a lot in Trains and World, so this is also a reason for picking this service. I love this fault simulator world, yes, but this is so great with this simulated faults. The procedure is, on this screen here, a yellow thing would pop up, then you can go into this, and instead of no malfunctions at the moment, it would tell you that there are malfunctions. If you are traveling, you would select this. Velocity greater than 0, and you get some instructions that you can do while running. And if you're actually brought your train to a standstill, you select the V equals 0, and you get instructions that you can do when you have to actually leave your cab and do something in the engine room. Sometimes you just have to switch off stuff and switch it on again. You can also talk to the guy on the radio.
Ja, Kollege, Fahrt ist hier bereits gestellt. Gute Reise noch.
Yeah, he's a bit soft. Yes. Ja, Kollege, Fahrt ist dir bereits gestellt. Gute Reise noch. This is what he says if you have actually a path and green lights. And he tells you that you've got your path already. If you're waiting at the red signal, he says something like, well, It's getting green as soon as it is getting green. Now we're getting slowed down to 100 because we're going into the opposite track. That was also the ZD7 indicator telling us that we're going onto the opposite track and allowing us. Inspector says, what happens if the simulation malfunctions? Well, there is actually, in this thing that I just showed you, as you probably know, an option where you can just reset all the faults. So we switched into the opposite track. As soon as the train is through, we can accelerate to 160 again. And since we're not driving in Poland, we do not have to change our light configuration. So, Gegengleisfahrt. 628 waiting here. And we probably have to switch back before we get to Neustadt on the Weinstraße. Typically the dispatcher would tell you how long you are supposed to stay on the left track. Well, we're getting... Ooh! And we're getting slowed down to 60. Let's see if we can make this without the PZB kicking us in the butt. Yes. Diving below the 80 from 160 is always quite a feat, even on a train. Well, 160 on the Gegengleis, just ask the Austrians, they're doing this all the time. But slowing us down from 160 to 60 in the regular braking distance, this is where I should say not for the faint of heart. So here's the switch, we're going back into our regular track. Lofty says, meanwhile to Brits where wrong line working is that thing, any speed is not for the faint of heart. Yes. And also not for the faint of patience. Alright, train is back on the regular track, we can accelerate. In about 10 days time I will be on a British train for the first time in this millennium, actually. So maybe I'm lucky and we're doing a wrong line. operation. Here, the weird signaling with switch your main circuit breaker on and then a little later again switch your main circuit breaker on. Juniper says, are you train traveling all the way or first flying over? I'm first flying over. I actually thought about traveling all the way by train, but it was so complicated to book. And it was so easy to fly to Stansted and then by train to Chatham. That I have to admit I went for the easier way out. And probably the cheaper way. So, now we're getting closer to Neustadt an der Weinstraße. There will be a limit to 130 first, and then a limit to 90. And here's the one for 130. And since I do not want to slow down to 80 because of the limit to 90, I'm already continue slowing down even though we are way below the 130 here. So that I am below the 105 when we hit this LF6 with the 9 on it. And you can see I'm not getting 1000 Hertz. And so why there is an LF7 with 100 I have never found out. Because there is no limit to 100. And it was not announced either. Now I should be at 90 here and I can coast in to the station. Here was the 90. Long freight train is leaving Neustadt an der Weinstraße. And after Neustadt an der Weinstraße, the fun bit, or the high-speed part is over and the beautiful part begins. I should leave it at 90 probably. Spectre says, "This is a very good quality cab ride video for this route and more from Frankfurt on YouTube with a TGV if I remember." Ah, that's nice. I actually did not look into cab views here. But then I could check out what the problem is with the signaling. And where this LF7 belongs to actually. Here we are. Unlock the doors. People, you can get out on your own. See? You have to open the doors for them. They are so shy. In former times you had to prevent passengers from opening the doors when rolling into the platform. Well, those are trains in world passengers, right? They are used to the trains opening the doors when running into the station, and they don't have to do anything. Especially not opening the doors. It's a nice station too, Neustadt an der Weinstraße. Lofty says at least it's not the intercity 125 doors. No! It's not those. No, I don't know how those work. Not how they work in the game, at least I don't remember. And sure as hell not as how they work in real life. Doors are closed, brakes are released. Maximum. Are these the ones with the windows? Asks Spectre. Lower the door window, stick your hand outside of the window to... Oh, yeah. Now I remember, yes. Signal switched off by Kennlicht. I think that makes sense. And now we are considerably slower with a speed of 90. Engineering. Yeah, engineering helps a lot in matters like train driving. But look how nice this city looks with this street that is going up the hill on the left. And how nicely the AFB is not overshooting. City Radar made it home. Did you take the subway after all? So, and now we're not stopping until we get to Kaiserslautern. Also for the lights, this bluish indicator here actually turns on to tell you that you have the headlights on. Why is nice. But now we should be getting an increase to 100 soonish. Speed limit oscillates between 100 and 90 at one point, also 80, before it increases to 150 before Kaiserslautern on the last leg. So I think now there should be an LF7 with a 10 on it. And here we go. Have to run over 200 meters. And then we can accelerate. How do you know? He said he returned from Vienna. Ah, yeah, you said so. Was it nice with the Austrians in Vienna? Did the Felixing work and the subway train spotting? Inspector says, no, I am craving Kalbsschnitzel with potatoes and Preiselbeeren. Well, I'm always craving Palatschinken if I think of Vienna. Und den großen braunen. Oh yes, I see there are lots of X-Wagons. Oops. My TV wants to switch off. I don't want him to do that. Slow down to 90. Actually can do the gradient, or at least almost. It is behind the little tunnel, so no need to rush it. Can almost not see it because this tree is in front of it, but here is actually an LF9 sign. And back to the 100. I'll actually travel to Rhineland-Palatinate later this year, but I have no idea whether I will be coming this way here. Maybe it is actually a very attractive line to travel. Did you see, Spectre, what locomotive that was at track 3? So, your favorite. If anyone can explain to me why those LF6 signs have those arrows on top of them, one pointing to the left, one pointing to the right, in a situation where there is not really any line branching off, neither to the left nor to the right. Yeah, 3 tracks. Not really. Not really, Spectre. There is a siding. You could go to the left if you are on the right, and you could go on the right if you are on the left, but the arrows were to the opposite sides, actually. And that's it. On the other hand, we will be running into a reduction to 90. So we actually need it right here for us on our through line. It is 1000 meters until the drop in speed limit. So is there any way to go to the right? I don't think so. There is a track to the right, but we'll be hard put to actually go on this track to the right without breaking everything. We could go to the left, but the arrow was to the right. And here is another LF6 for the 90. But this cannot be the primary one because there is no room to slow down to the 90 that we just passed now. True, the Spectre, maybe they mixed up directions and 90 applies anyway even if you stay on the right. In my opinion, they should have just left away those arrows. They don't make sense. Soon enough we will have a drop to 80 anyway. Between the two tunnels here. The first indicator for it. Since we are not traveling faster than 95. We are not getting 1000 hertz. Did I mention how happy I am with this AFB? It is working really well. Here's Seti. Now we are passing Frankenstein. There's a weird piece of tunnel that is either extremely light or extremely dark, and then you've got the light in your cab. Yeah. There is one piece of tunnel with completely broken lighting. Increase to 10. Did you see the ruin on the hill? It's a nice one. I thought they fixed it ages ago. Remember it from day one. Well, there it is. "14 kilometers to Kaiserslautern still." Yeah, even though there are some weird things with the signaling and stuff, I really like this route. I enjoyed driving it a lot. Yeah. Now, because we were talking about weird signaling issues. This Rautentafel here tells you there is a BU signal coming up. You know, those thingies that we most probably first encountered in Niedertalbahn. They should be flashing if the level crossing is secured, and they should be off if the level crossing is not secured. And if they are off, this 1000 Hertz magnet here should be on. Is a 1000 Hertz magnet? Yes, it is. But I strained my eyes, and this thing is not flashing. At least I can't see it flashing. That means actually we should get 1000 Hertz here and slow down in front of the level crossing that is coming up in like a kilometer. And then secure the level crossing on our own. But it is quite annoying to do this every time because it is not flashing at all. At least I have never seen it flashing. So there's probably no way to ignore it. Here is the level crossing, and it is actually secured. The barriers are down. Spectre says, I had the opposite problem at Zwangsbremsung, even though the level crossing was secured. At this special spot. That's interesting. Because of all the services that I drove on this DLC, it was never flashing. Was it in a scenario, maybe? Or was it in timetable mode? In the scenario, the setting might actually be opposite then. In timetable. But the BU signal was flashing in each case. On the PS5. Interesting. Here the the limit, not the limit. The limit increases to 130. So maybe this is what I'm experiencing is the status after the fix of the problem that you encountered. And the fix was to switch off the magnet and the signal with it. Let me know if you encounter this again, or whether it has changed for you now as well. We should already be in the 150 section. I missed this because I read the chat, or is it coming here? Ah, it is here. Yes, the 150. 200 meters. And now put the foot down and go to Kaiserslautern. Quite a long tunnel here. Spectre says that might be true. I have not played it in a while, but the route is nice indeed. I remember the ICET run in the evening, very atmospheric. Yeah, totally. Unfortunately, the AFP on the ICET is not as exact as the one that is running on this machine here. Because when you're running from Kaiserslautern to Mannheim, it always overshoots. So, now we're almost at Kaiserslautern. Kaiserslautern is tricky because they typically don't slow you down before you get very close to the station, and then you get jumped at with a VR0. I think we can have it coast now, and as soon as we're going to the left at the end of this long straight, then we should start slowing down a bit. So, still a full high green announced, but I am quite sure at the next main there will be a distance signal all yellow. And I was not mistaken. Whoosh! And here we are at Kaiserslautern. And had I not braked so much in the end, probably exactly on time. 500 Hertz magnet, we are below the 40, so it won't hurt us. Please keep your seatbelts fastened until the train has reached the parking position. It has not reached the parking position yet. Well, 10 meters short. Well, that's it. At any rate, we arrived at Kaiserslautern in one piece. Our bright white intercity Baureihe 101 locomotive is here. Passengers are actually daring to leave the train. And those 10 meters are within Flup Flup. And here we are. Within the margin. Alright guys, thank you so much for staying with me all the time and for participating in the chat, for your support. Again, I will try to show the new 101 DLC, but I have to get it running on my Steam installation because it has not been released on the Epic Game Store. What I'm very disappointed about. So at the moment, if you're considering buying your stuff on the Epic Game Store, your Train Sim World stuff up on the Epic Game Store, you cannot be sure to get all the DLCs and complete your collection. So yeah, you have to keep that in mind when you decide on what platform you're investing in. I still hope I can get them to publish the new DLC on the Epic Game Store as well, because I would really like to complete my collection there, and the 101 stuff is good. The basic 101 stuff is a must-have DLC in my opinion. If you're interested in driving a bit realistically, then you should definitely have it. This is a gem. This is unique in that kind, in this aspect, and we will see what uniqueness the gameplay pack actually adds to this. The most important thing is anyway happening in the timetable services, when you can get jumped at with malfunctions out of the blue, and you have to figure out how to solve it without the scenario guiding you through. So this is the most important part of the original expert DLC anyway. Mr. Toby Stead says, thank you for this. I'm sure I will be watching it back. So happy that you liked it, and thank you for watching. Inspector says, nice run. Thank you for the stream, Tiger. Thank you guys for staying with me. And JJ says, great stream, thank you. Thank you for staying with me all the time. It's been more than 2 hours. And, well, I will be back next Sunday, I guess. Then there will be, well, maybe no week break, because I will be back on Sunday even when I'm at Chatham during the week starting at the 11th, I think. Guys, take care. Be nice to each other. Have a great time. Enjoy the game and see you around.